Hola, it's us again, living on the Silver Coast now. Our life is a little bit different from what it was like when we were in central Portugal. We moved to Portugal 2.5 years ago now, had a baby, now we've got a toddler.
So today we thought we would make an updated pros and cons of living in Portugal video.
But to add some depth to the subject, we're also going to be comparing our life in central Portugal to living on the Silver Coast. Let's start on a positive note. Let's start with a pro.
The beaches, they are really clean and they are really quiet for most of the time.
We visited quite a few beaches in our time here in Portugal, concentrating on the Algarve and on the Silver Coast and even up north a little bit. And we've gone in multiple seasons as well. And even if the beaches are a little bit busy, all you've got to do is walk a little bit further down or drive to another entrance point and there will be nobody there.
The coastlines here are so long that you can always find your own little spot on the beach.
Especially if you've taken your own picnic with you. While we're on the subject of eating out in bars and restaurants is definitely cheaper than what we've experienced in comparison to UK restaurants for sure. We find our general price line is around €10 per head, maybe a little bit more if you get a lot of alcoholic beverages.
To buy wine here in Portugal is also really cheap and it's probably about half the price of what you would buy a bottle of wine for in the UK. And here there are so many local and regional wines on offer. You can pick up a decent bottle of wine for about €3 or €4 even.
Yeah, Portuguese wine is highly underrated at the moment. We lost our little one halfway through that adult discussion of wine. And whether we've bought it in a supermarket or we've gone to a regional shop, we always find that the prices are extremely low for the quality.
You do have your low cost and your high cost wines, but we have found that even the low cost wines are really good.
Yeah, sometimes better. In our opinion, of course. We're not wine experts, but it does taste good. Another pro, while we're on the subject of being local, produce. Whether we go to the supermarket or a local market, more vegetables and fruits seem to come from Portugal. Have you come to join us again?
Talking about vegetables.
Turn a bit nummy.
Also, even the produce that does get imported, say an orange, you can get oranges from Spain, but right next to them there will be Portugal oranges as well. So there is that choice.
And I think that this is reflected in the taste and the flavour of the vegetables as well. It's especially noticeable in the strawberries. I feel like even the bigger chained supermarkets follow a bit of a seasonal rule, and sometimes if it's not available in the country you just won't get it, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
We're going to lose our little story again. Another pro that we've noticed living here in Portugal is the friendships that we've formed. Our Portuguese friends, you may as well just call them family. From the very first meeting until today, those people that we've met have been so open, so honest and so helpful and so generous beyond belief sometimes.
Everything just feels very genuine and we feel so welcomed. We've made a couple of these really good friendships where you may not speak to each other every day or every month even, but when you do speak and make contact again, it's like picking up an old friendship that you've had for years.
Yeah.
And it just feels very comfortable. And it's just nice.
Of course, not every single person you meet is going to become a good friend of yours, but we felt that there is a noticeable difference in acceptance from all of the people that we've met and become friends in that way.
Yeah. And another pro is how much they love kids here in Portugal. Quite often we would meet people in the park or just out and about and they would ask us about childcare for Story and if she's going to go to a creche and things like that. And from those interactions we found out that a lot of the childcare around where we used to live in central Portugal was free for children of Story's age. I'm not sure if that's true nationwide, but where we lived it was. Priority is actually given to young families in shops and things here in Portugal. So if you're queuing at a supermarket and you're pregnant or you've got a small baby with you, you'll get waved through to the front of the queue.
Yeah.
Which is lovely. It just shows how much they value family in Portugal.
Oh, definitely.
And another thing that I love, it's happened quite a few times when we've been in restaurants or cafes with Story, they will bring adult place settings for Story and for the children. So they'll set up with a proper cup and knife and fork and everything and a placemat for Story as they would for us, which I think is really nice, rather than just kind of ignoring her and oh she's not going to eat the food or whatever.
Or giving her a kids menu, like we all get the same thing and we all get treated like a unit. And also when you walk in you don't feel like children aren't welcome in restaurants. It's the opposite in fact, you know, they'll bring pens and paper for her to play with. It's like they really want the kids there, they really want you to all feel comfortable as a unit, and it feels noticeably different. One of the major cons that we've actually experienced living here in Portugal is the forest fires. They are bad and they happen every year, especially around the central Portugal region where there's a lot of eucalyptus trees growing.
We have first-hand experience of this happening when we lived in central Portugal, and it was scary. It was a massive fire, and it was just the not knowing of what was going to happen, if it was going to reach the house. And we know of people that were much closer to the fire than we were, and they had a really bad time. And it's just a bit of fear living in central Portugal surrounded by the flammable trees.
Yeah.
You don't know when one's going to happen, or if it, it might not happen, or it might, you just don't know. And that's the thing that was quite worrying.
Another bad point there that links that together as well is the fire service here is all volunteer, so there wasn't enough firefighters to deal with the blazes. So if something really big does happen, you either have to know what you're doing and try and help yourself,
Thank you.
and you can't just rely on some service to whisk in and rescue you and save you, because there might not be enough people stretched out across the region to help. This isn't something that just happens once. Apparently it's been happening for a very long time. It's a big problem, especially where eucalyptus grows. We have heard that different policies have been put in place to try and reduce the amount of forest fires that happen here in Portugal, but the rules aren't fully enforced everywhere you go.
And also, it's not just the risk of maybe a house burning down or something like that, because if you have the right rules around your property, then your house shouldn't really be at risk of being burnt to the ground. But it's the surrounding area, it's the view as well. You might have a house with a stunning view over gorgeous forests and trees, and after a forest fire it's all burnt to a cinder.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in quite a few areas where we lived.
Our last town, it took 2 years for you to start seeing green come back on the trees. It was just black, scorched forest. So if you're considering living in central Portugal over different regions like the Algarve or the Silver Coast, when you choose your home, when you choose your area, just have a look at the land and layout and see if that problem will affect you. It's definitely more of a problem in central Portugal than it is here.
Yes, it is.
Another con that's quite noticeable from the minute you arrive is the fuel prices here in Portugal are not cheap. When you watch pros and con videos, most people will tell you that the cost of living in Portugal is cheap, and for the most part it is, but diesel and fuel prices are much higher than they are in Spain, for example. So make sure you've got a really economical car.
We have heard of people driving across to Spain from Portugal to fill up their car and get a full tank of fuel and then go back home to Portugal. And also buying gas canisters. It's a lot cheaper to get gas in Spain than Portugal as well.
So they'll get their fuel, they get their gas, and they'll come back in. So if you live close enough to the border, that's something you could do. That's your paintings. Yeah, those are nice paintings. Thank you.
Picture.
Yeah, we'll frame them if you want. We won't frame these ones. Another big con are the toll road prices here. They're not quite as expensive as they are in France, but they're not cheap either. Recently we drove from central Portugal all the way down to the Algarve. It was about a 4-hour drive, and the toll road prices were around 30 to 35 euros. Now, one big issue is that there was no reasonable alternative route to get to certain places without getting on a toll road. And it's apparently a big problem across the country. People are being forced to pay the tolls to get from here to there because it's unreasonable to drive a route around. So you can be shafted by these costs. They're really high.
Some of the non-toll routes to get to the same destination can be efficient, like driving from where we used to live in central Portugal to Porto. Going the non-toll route, it would add about 20 minutes to half an hour onto the journey, which wasn't too bad.
But that same route that we just talked about from central Portugal to the Algarve would have taken close to 7 hours if we didn't take the toll road. So it didn't seem like a reasonable alternative.
But then if you're doing a return journey, you have to factor in the cost of the toll roads as well. So you could be spending, to travel the length of the country, 70 to 80 euros on tolls.
Which could be as much, if not more, than your fuel cost.
Another con that I'm going to mention is finding activities for toddlers or young children under 5. It has been difficult. When we were back in the UK recently, I found dance classes for little kids.
Even things like baby yoga and massage classes and all these kind of crazy things that people like to do these days. All those kind of activities are much more difficult to find here in Portugal if they exist.
Yeah, and also finding things online is almost next to impossible.
Yeah. We're not saying that these activities don't exist in the country. Most likely down in the Algarve you will get more of a concentration of these kind of things because there's more people from other countries that are looking for it. But all of these kind of activities aren't well represented online, so it's very difficult to just type something in on Google and find it. It has to be a word of mouth thing, listed on a notice board somewhere, most likely in Portuguese, so if you can't read the language you won't find these things.
This is just our experience of things like that, and things that I have found, local activities seem to be aimed at older children. So for Story there's not really much going on that I can take her to without it being her going to a creche or a kindergarten. So like an after school activity for a toddler doesn't seem to exist. I've struggled to find that kind of thing, but that might just be me.
I feel that maybe here in Portugal those kind of ages aren't as important to be setting up classes for, because so many families just hang out together and do family activities together, and we know that people are looking for them because when we see on the Facebook pages you get a lot of people saying, I want to move to Portugal, where can I do this for my kid, where can I do that? And it's difficult to advise because we haven't found them in a couple of years. But that might change in the near future. Another con that we've found, especially recently when we've been trying to move house, is that finding furnished rental properties is extremely difficult to find online. And even if you do go to a real estate agent and they find you a furnished property, it will be partly furnished and the furniture won't be great, and you would still have to spend a fair amount of money putting some stuff in there to make it feel homely.
Yeah, for example, a couple of our friends that furnished a 2-bedroom apartment, they spent around €7,000.
And that was just at IKEA as well. So you have to add that to your cost. If you're moving somewhere unfurnished, you're going to have to spend a bit.
It might not be furnished to your standard or to exactly what you think a furnished place should be. So for example, we moved into our new house here, fully furnished, but it was missing things that we needed. So we did have to go and source some furniture from elsewhere, even though it is a fully furnished place.
That's right. Now if we compare that to our experiences that we've had before in other countries like Asia, where it's kind of set up for people coming in, living and enjoying and then moving on, it's quite different. So just keep that in mind if you're moving here.
So another con that we're going to mention is something that we spoke about quite extensively in our previous pros and cons of Portugal video, so we're not going to go on about it too much, but it is the fact of the house insulation and houses being cold during the winter.
And generally how cold it gets in Portugal. So if you want to know more about that, you can go to our previous video, but to add a little bit more depth to it now we've been here for longer, the energy costs here are pretty high considering the cost of living in the country is supposed to be low. What we heard this year especially was that some of the lower income families that were living in central Portugal, the death toll rate of people that were just trying to power through was extremely high for a European country.
Mainly in the smaller villages and the elderly community. There were people actually dying from the cold, which is just crazy. Especially in such a developed place as this. It's not something that we expected to see or hear. It seems somewhat odd that some of the newer properties that are being built are still being built the same way. So even a property that's less than 5 years old could still have the same problem. So you'd have to do your own research and find out if a place is going to be warm enough for you, or if you're going to have to do it Portuguese style and power through with jumpers. Lots of layers.
It's not comfortable. Another con, and this is something that popped up recently when somebody emailed me asking about the sea and whether it's good to swim in. Now I don't particularly like swimming in the sea, so this isn't an issue for me, but what I've found is that it's pretty cold everywhere you go and all times of the year.
Even in the summer. I mean, you do see people in the sea and playing around and stuff, but if you're into that, it might not be as enjoyable because it is chilly, it is the Atlantic Ocean.
It's rough.
And the waves are very, very rough.
If you're into your water sports, your surfing, your windsurfing, great, perfect. But if you're here to leisurely lay about and swim in the sea, even in the Algarve, it doesn't really get warm enough in my opinion. We've heard that it gets warmer at the end of summer, but we've tested it and it's still pretty cold.
It's great for paddling. But maybe not full submersion.
Now we've got one massive pro here, which is kind of a comparison between the Silver Coast and central Portugal. Living on the Silver Coast, we actually spend less money on fuel because there's so much to see within a shorter distance.
When we lived in central Portugal, it was about 45 minutes to an hour to get to places, which is still great in some circumstances.
In each direction. Where we are now in Caldesterania, we have the amazing surfers' haven of Nazaré, where they do all the massive surfing competitions, and they have waves that go up to 50 meters high. We're minutes from that area, and it's a lovely town as well if you just want to hang out and walk around and not do any surfing. We have the amazing lagoon of Obidos, which is very near to where we live, and what's great about that area is because the water comes in a little bit, you don't have that swimming problem because your kids can paddle in the calm waters.
There's also, of course, the lovely town, the medieval town of Obidos. We've been there many times. It's a great place to take visitors. It's really interesting, great place to walk around and take photographs, and lots of lovely little shops and things like that there. And the Silver Coast in general is full of lots of wild hiking. Since moving here, we've been on lots of nice hikes along the coast, and it is really nice to just get out with a picnic and just be out in the elements.
The landscape is fantastic up there, the views are stunning, and that wild Atlantic Ocean smashing against the rocks is something that just looks magical anytime.
The Buddha Eden Gardens is a fantastic day out. We've took my mum there.
It reminded us of our time in Asia. It's a really beautiful place. It wasn't expensive to get in either. It was only a couple of euros for a tourist attraction. I felt that was pretty low. And Peniche was really good. One of those super laid back, surfy vibe areas, which is just absolutely beautiful. Again, lots of stunning coastline, lots of activities going on.
And a vegan cafe.
Yes, a vegan cafe. And of course we've got the capital city of Lisbon, which is much nearer to us now, only about 40-45 minutes away. We've barely scratched the surface of that place. We've not had that much time to explore them. So in comparison to the central regions, of course, yes, the journey times were longer, but you did have the fantastic Serra da Estrela. If you were looking for snow, you can drive up there when it gets a little bit colder, and most of the time there was snow on the top of the mountains.
Yeah.
They've got a ski resort too, which is running when there's a lot of snow, so that was really interesting. We've got our favourite city, Porto, where the famous port wine is found. Near to that you've got the Douro Valley, where the famous port wine is grown.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's lovely to have the Douro River there as well, where you can do a boat cruise.
Yeah. We've got Coimbra, the famous university city.
It's a really great place, and of course it is close to our heart because it's where our daughter was born.
And then just dotted everywhere you had the schist villages, the old stone villages of Portugal, which were really cool to see. Some of them just look completely abandoned, but that was great for photography. It felt like you were pioneers, you were the first people walking into those places.
Yeah, and there are more set up ones as well, like Piedal, a few in Losa that we found where you can walk around and they've been restored, and they're just really nice.
Yeah. There are too many beautiful hills, mountains, waterfalls and villages to mention, and we really do love central Portugal. It was fantastic living up there for the time that we were, but versus here we've found that people are more willing to visit this kind of area as well. It's more of a holiday destination, being closer to the sea, being closer to Lisbon, the capital city, and to an airport as well. I hope we've covered some different points, some more interesting angles to the whole pros and cons of Portugal. We didn't want to start this video and talk about the normal stuff like the weather being great. All of that stuff is self-explanatory.
And of course, if you haven't seen our original pros and cons of Portugal, we do talk about a lot more stuff that we haven't covered here. So go and check that out if you want to know more.
Yeah, and if you want to see Story, 3-month-old baby. We love living in Portugal. It's a very, very good country to settle. There is so much to see and do here, and you do feel extremely welcome once you start getting settled in. Hope you enjoyed this video, hope you found it useful, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.